Well, that was fun. Well, at least we were just talking about the storm a little while ago, which I assume is what was responsible for that. So I apologize. Hopefully, some people, because this is going to be a different link than what you were seeing before. If you're watching on Facebook, you'll just see it on.
Or was it Facebook?
Oh, it was Facebook. Remember, we just
Yeah.
talked about. But I don't think Facebook can take down our YouTube stream.
No.
Yeah.
That's Google. Google does that. Anyway, so if by some slim chance anybody actually who was watching finds these streams and finds us over here, we're going to try to finish up the program just on this other link. So I apologize.
Before we're done with this next story.
Yes. So you were talking, right?
I believe so. I was introducing
again,
our third story. Third story of the night. It's the Allison Mayer segment. Shout out to Allison Mayer. Thanks for sending us this story.
Allison Mayer probably saw us on the old stream, but now she has no idea. No,
well, if you come across this even after we're off the air. But anyway, the story comes from the Daily Signal. It's about NPR. That's the National Public Radio. They released a new ethics policy about specifically pertaining to their journalists and their policy, which states outright that they are going to allow their journalists to, quote, participate in activities that advocate for the freedom and dignity of human beings on both social media and in real life. So long story short, that means that they're allowing their reporters to engage in direct activism. So they have pretty much taken off the shroud of objectivity and are allowing their reporters to engage in causes, rallies and things like that. Particularly, it announced a policy change mentioning BLM and pride parades and things like that. However, some critics have said, well, don't expect them to be joining any pro-life protests anytime soon. So definitely the bias is heavy. You can see the bias in the way that NPR leans. Now, this would be a different story. Wouldn't be much news if NPR was a private, kind of page or a private entity. However, NPR is a public taxpayer-funded entity. It's the Public Broadcasting Network, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which oversees both NPR and PBS. So the Corporation for Public Broadcasting approved a budget by Congress, at least the 2020 budget was $515 million of taxpayer dollars that goes to these two syndications. And so that's kind of where the rubber meets the road. So they're encouraging their journalists to engage in active activism. And they're no longer hiding behind this faux objectivity, as the article claims. So certainly that's, concerning, but at least, now we know where they stand. What are your thoughts?
I don't think it's concerning at all. Sorry, we always agree too much on the show. I just wanted to say that to see what his face would look like. No. I think there's, like some of our other stories, there's a couple different approaches to take to this. Obviously, one area of concern is, like you mentioned, the fact that it receives public funding. Now, NPR is not exclusively funded by the federal government. As a matter of fact, I think it's still a relatively small portion of their funding comes through this, but they do receive, federal government funding. And so there's one key question is it appropriate for something that receives federal funding whose primary purpose is news distribution to accept to advocate and engage in political advocacy? I will say that there certainly are. I mean, we receive as a church, or really more the school side of things. We have students that come here that. Why are you pointing at yourself? I'll get to that in a second. But like on the school side of things, we have students that are engaged in free lunch programs, things like that, and some of that comes down through federal government funding. We have the Food Closet receives federal funding for food. And so there are, federal funds that do come into our church organization. And now a church as a 501c3 is not allowed to advocate for particular political candidates or anything like that. You certainly can advocate and not put your tax-exempt status at risk for certain issues that, obviously are, for us, faith issues that also have a political bent to them because they just have become kind of crossover. There's nothing wrong with that. So I think one distinction here, though, is that this is an organization that the primary purpose is news reporting.
Right.
And that's so there's one issue is like, should there's another issue. Should any news reporting agency be funded by the federal government? I mean, let's talk about communist China for a minute. Okay, let's not. But you get my point. All right.
The word of the day is propaganda.
Yeah, exactly. So I think there's an argument to be had whether we should be funding, the government should be funding NPR, period.
Yeah.
All right. But if they are funding an organization like NPR, should they be free to have their reporters, engaging in political activism? But here's, for me, even I don't know if it's a bigger issue or just another issue. I look at this and I even leave aside the fact that of the federal funding and everything like that. And I grew up in an era, and maybe this dates me, not 50 yet, but where at least the aura of news reporting, not news commentary, but news reporting, was trying to be objective. When I grew up, you didn't necessarily know the political leanings of your big three news anchors, all right? Because that wasn't their job was to make sure you didn't know that,
right.
Was to try to report things objectively. So for that reason, I think getting back to kind of our first story, it's like, you want to do X, you got to agree to Y. It's like, nobody has a constitutional right to be a news reporter. You don't. And so I personally don't have a problem, and I think it actually should be the case, that if you want to be a news reporter, not commentator, reporter, then you shouldn't be engaging in political activism, because that inevitably is going to call into question the objectivity of your news reporting. And that holds true for me, whether it's NPR, whether it's NBC, whether it's CBS, whether it's CNN, whether it's Fox News, all those. Again, speaking on the reporting side, I know some of those networks also have commentary programs,
sure.
And that's the nature of it. So I have more to say, but obviously my voice is going, so I'm going to stop right there.
Yeah, well, I think all but gone are the days of unbiased journalism or honest journalism, because, yeah, you see, it's just like we talked about earlier with the polarization of our politics and just about everything. There are certain key issues that NPR advocates for overwhelmingly. It talks about in this article, just it likens it to being pinned down in a wrestling match, and after the 3 seconds, just hammering home the same issues over and over and over. They got these pet issues that they hammer home, yet at the same time, NPR was criticizing the Daily Wire, Ben Shapiro's show, for essentially spreading disinformation just because it's conservative. So this article kind of takes a shot at it. There's an NPR article that says, by only covering specific stories that bolster the conservative agenda, such as negative reports about socialist countries and polarizing ones about race and sexuality issues, and only including certain facts, readers still come away from the Daily Wire's content with the impression that Republican politicians can do little wrong and cancel culture is among the nation's greatest threats. That was what NPR said. But you can just as easily flip the script by only changing a few words, and this is what this article is kind of taking a pot shot at. It says, by only covering specific stories that bolster the progressive agenda, such as polarizing ones about race and sexuality issues, readers still come away from NPR's content with the impression that Democrat Republicans can do little wrong, and former President Donald Trump is among the nation's greatest threats. So if you're going to be criticizing another news outlet just for the sake of, or for no other reason that they have an opposing viewpoint, then that's not real journalism anymore.
Well, and here's the problem. The Daily Wire is not a news outlet.
Right.
The Daily Wire does not pretend to be a news outlet. It says right there in its About Us page that they do not claim to be a news reporting outlet. Mm-hmm. They are a commentary. I'm trying to find the exact words here. Because what's funny is that I did print out that NPR article that you were referring to, and they even mentioned this, toward the bottom of the article as an aside. It says, publicly, the site does not purport to be a traditional news source. What are you saying? Privately, they do? I mean, what does that even mean? Publicly, they don't claim to be. Then they don't claim to be. And it goes on to say, On its About page, the site declares the Daily Wire does not claim to be without bias, and goes on to say, we're opinionated, we're noisy, and we're having a good time. That's the key difference for me. I don't go to the Daily Wire expecting to get objective news reporting that's giving me all the information on both sides. No, they have a viewpoint. They're going to pick and choose the particular facts that they believe support their viewpoint, and those are the facts they're going to present to me. If I want to properly evaluate their viewpoint, I've got to go elsewhere to try to get objective news reporting, and that's the problem, is that there are very few of those elsewheres left anymore.
Yeah.
The distinction here is NPR makes no such claim. NPR claims to be an objective news reporting site. And yet, when they went on to, one of the criticisms they launched against the Daily Wire is like, well, nothing they say is false per se, but we went on their website and we saw X number of stories about COVID. And those stories were predominantly about, a lot of them focused on the potential risks of taking vaccines, but they said nothing about the scientific, value of vaccines and all these positive things. Well, I did a little experiment, and I went yesterday onto NPR's homepage, okay?
Oh, boy.
And NPR's homepage, as of yesterday, had a total of 7 articles that I found headlined there about COVID and vaccines. And those 7 articles, while they had, of course, they were all focused on those same things that they were saying the Daily Wire articles were not focused on. Mm-hmm. They were all about the scientific efficacy of the vaccines. And I mentioned at the top of the show, and you weren't here for this point. Look, I'm pro-vax, all right, when it comes to COVID. I mean, I think I'm also pro-freedom. I think people should have the right to choose. But I believe in encouragement and all that. So don't go off saying that I'm like trying to tell people not to get vaccinated. I'm not doing that. But they, of those 7 articles that they had listed, none of them talked about or focused at all about the potential side effects. So literally, it's the exact reverse. Opposite. Everything they're accusing the Daily Wire says, all your articles are just talking about potential side effects and not talking about the scientific efficacy of it. Well, NPR, on your page, you had 7 articles, all of which were about the scientific efficacy of it, none of which talked about the potential side effects of it. And the difference there is, NPR, is that when I go to the Daily Wire, that's what I expect, and they're upfront with me right from the start that that's what I'm gonna get from them. You're not, all right? You claim to be showing people just the objective truth, and yet you are doing the exact same thing that you're accusing the Daily Wire of doing, but you're supposed to be objective, and you should do better.
Are you aware that there's a Society of Professional Journalists, and they actually have a code of ethics?
How many of them follow that code of ethics?
Well, very few, I think, follow the first. I mean, there's 4 general principles. And the very first one is seek truth and report it.
Yeah, and that's what.
And I get they're not. I get it that it's hard to seek the truth about the vaccines because
not all the facts are
not
available
all the facts
yet.
are in, or but you're supposed to take responsibility for the accuracy of your work, verify the information before releasing it. What was the
But I mean, honestly, when it comes to COVID vaccine, a lot of these facts are in that they're still choosing not to report.
Support the open and civil exchange of views, even views they find repugnant. Where's the other one? There's like.
Anyway, I do.
There's a lot of things, but yeah, my favorite is that you're supposed to be fair.
But again, my issue is that we hear a lot of people complaining about disinformation and everything like that.
Yeah,
and I am, again, I've said time and time again on the show that I am a proponent of the free marketplace of ideas, and so I think the way that is best fostered is by us giving complete information.
Mm-hmm.
There is information. At this point, I think we have a very large sample size because so many people have been vaccinated. Now, we don't have the duration, and so I'm open to listening to people about that. The vaccines just started getting rolled out this past December, so we certainly don't have long-term data.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it hasn't been administered long-term. I get that. The response, some people would say, but, you know, the COVID vaccine is just a variation of other similar types of vaccines that we've already been created. It's not a whole brand new beast. I get that too. There are risk factors. We've seen risk factors, and there have been side effects. I personally think that, you know, we should. I like to encourage people to get vaccinated, even despite the side effects, because I think that the pros far outweigh the cons. You can agree with me on that. You can disagree with me on that. But what we should all be able to agree to do is all of those facts should be presented.
Sure.
And all of those facts should be presented so that people can make an intelligently informed, free choice. If you are an advocacy outlet like the Daily Wire is, I don't hold you to as high of a standard to present me with all of those facts. And I do think that people should then, again, don't get all of your news just from an advocacy outlet, which unfortunately, yes, it does happen nowadays. But if you're claiming to be these few remaining entities that is giving us objective information, then your responsibility, whether you agree with it, whether you disagree with it, is not to try to persuade, which I think NPR does. It's to inform. Leave the persuading to the commentary people. Your job is to inform.
And frankly, it's insulting to your readers' intelligence to withhold that information when you're presenting yourself as an objective media reporter, news reporter, and to withhold that information thinking that people can't go elsewhere and find it. It's kind of insulting. And
I will say, as much as, you know, this article certainly had a certain political slant to it, and it was saying, well, we you know, if NPR is going to allow its reporters to go become political activists, well, clearly they're only going to be, you know, being activists for these causes, not these causes. You mentioned, like, you're not going to see them do pro-life, and that, by and large, what we see from coming out of NPR, I think, yeah, that's probably true, but at the same time, I don't want Fox News reporters, again, not commentators, I don't want Fox News reporters to become political activists. Right. Because if you're claiming to be an objective news reporting agency, and I got news for you, a lot of those Fox News reporters, we know they would be going to pro-life marches and things like that. But if they're a reporter, then I don't think they should be. So I think the risk is the same no matter which side of the political aisle you're on. And the risk is that we lose that ability to have objective reporting that we can go to. And then everything becomes opinion, and that just furthers the division that we were talking about before.
And while I agree that I wouldn't want a Fox News reporter to be an activist either, the difference still lies in that Fox News is not funded by the government.
Yeah, and that is certainly another issue. And so you're right, I did kind of skirt over that because I said regardless of it, but look, I personally don't think the government should be funding any news agency, period. Right. I just don't. I mean, there's danger there. There's a huge danger.
Yeah, I mean, isn't that what happens in most of your communist countries?
Yes.
Right.
Yes. And so, yeah, I have a problem with that.
But, but you have to be careful because, like you said, we're a church and we are what people would consider partially government
but
funded.
We're not information. We're not responsible for spreading objective information about what's going on in the world.
And that money is strictly regulated where we get to use it and what we get to use it for and how we get to use it. And I've talked here on the program about how I have to make sure nobody feels like there's a this for that kind of situation when they come to get the food.
None of that information, for example, goes to fund this program.
Yeah.
None of it.
No.
At NPR, that's exactly what it does.
Right.
It's exactly what it does. You know, and so having the government pay for a news reporting agency that is supposed to be reporting on that same government. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
You know? So I'm not a fan of NPR to begin with. I certainly don't think NPR is a trusted news source in that regard. But I have a problem with any news reporting agency doing what they're doing.
Yeah.
So anyway. All right. Well, I don't know if anybody even people may have no idea what we think on this issue because they've never found the second
maybe you'll stumble across us. So if you still do, comment in. Well, I guess we'll check either of the two.
We'll check both.
links. Yeah.
And I think what I'll do, and I think I should be able to do this, is on the first YouTube stream at least, I'll be able to put a pop-up link basically at the end of that that links to this one, so people can see the continuation. So
Cool.
All right. We did finish the show. So speaking of which, I want to go home and just that. I want to go home. So there's nothing else more to that. I just want to go home. So and recover my voice. It gets, the hotter it gets in here, the worse my voice gets. And for those of you who don't know, we have to turn off the fans. In my office is a sauna, and we have to turn off the fans when we go on air. Otherwise, you'd be hearing the fans blowing around all the time.
Although usually it's cooler underground.
Not here. No,
It might be the insulation.
Sorry, there's really, it depends how far underground you go.
True.
There's a certain,
True.
never mind. There's a joke there. So Mo's wailing and gnashing of teeth. Yeah, I know someplace that, down that is very, very hot. Not someplace I want to spend eternity. So anyway, that's all I got. So thank you all for watching. We appreciate it. Thank you, Ben, for finally joining us.
Thank you, Ken, for covering.
Thank you, Mr. Stay Puft, for filling in for Ben. And oh, look, she turned on her producer cam.
Hey, thank you, Mary Kay.
Thank you, Mary Kay, for using the producer cam and for all of your help.
I used it at the very beginning, and I went,
Really? I didn't see you use it.
when you told everybody that I didn't have my sign.
Oh. Well, thank you very much, Mary Kay, because you also helped bail us out and get us up and running again when we lost the stream. So,
Yes.
All right. And thank you all for watching. We will be back next week, Wednesday at 5:30, hopefully with one uninterrupted stream and no interfering thunderstorms. All right. And a voice, yes. See you then. God bless.